On the back is the solution. I'm taking and printing out the solution. I think it's probably easier to see. You guys have a copy of it. Okay, good. Okay, what do I got here? 12. 12, 1. Okay, so okay, so I'm guessing from some of the emails, this problem was, the first problem was challenging. I guess some people thought so. It was challenging. There were a couple of things to it. So let me go through my solution. So we needed to read in a string and print out the location, print out the number of vowels that occurred in the string, and then the location of where those vowels are. So my general idea here was to use a for loop to extract each character from the string, because I needed to look at each character in the string to see if in fact was a vowel. And so I extract the character using the for statement. Okay, is everybody good with this? Okay, so ch is going to be a variable that is going to now, if I type in the word hello, it's going to assume 5 values, the character H, the character E, L, L, and O. And now that I've been able to, via the for statement, be able to extract the character, I'm going to test to see if it's a vowel by creating, in this case, a list, vowels. If you didn't have Y, that's fine. And then I'm going to test to see if that CH is an element of that list, which would then indicate that it's a vowel. So the in operator is going to return true if this value exists within this list. I could have, instead of using a list here, I could have had a string. I could have had just the string A, E, I, O, U, and the same, and this would have worked similarly. And so, okay, so hopefully everybody got that idea to extract the character, see if it's a vowel. I guess the hard part here was, okay, now that I've been able to detect that it's a vowel, how do I then figure out what position in the string that vowel occurs at? And the only way that I could figure out to do that was to create another variable I called indx, and indx is going to be incremented each time I go through the loop, because what I want to do is I want to, let me just type it in here. So if I had hello, what I wanted to do is I wanted to have a variable that assumed the value of the index for each character. So when I'm looking at the character H, I want a value to be 0. I want some variable to be 0, because if in fact it's a vowel, what I intend to do is to take that number, this index, and append it to a list. So I was going to save all the locations of the vowels by creating a list. So I created this empty list, vowel locations. And whenever I found a vowel, this being true, I then took this index, which I'm initializing to 0, and I'm incrementing by 1 each time I iterate through the for loop. I'm then going to take the value of that index and append it to the list. And so now every time I find a vowel, I'll be able to get its index and add it to the list. So this was a little tricky. I think hopefully everybody got, okay, maybe another, okay, so when I come out of this, when this for loop ends, then I took the count of the vowels, so this is a little tricky. I took the length, since this is a list, and I wanted to know the number of vowels found, I simply took the length of this list. Another way we could have done this is we could perhaps had a variable count vowels. And then every time I found one, in addition to adding it to the list, I could have said count vowels is equal to count vowels plus 1, and then I wouldn't have had to do this tricky thing with length. I could have just said if count vowels is, if that's equal to 0, let me do it that way. Maybe that'll be better. And so I could have counted the number of times I came into the that I found a vowel in addition to appending it to the list. Anybody have any comments, questions on this?
So is it vowel locations finding the index of the vowel, or is it finding the actual letter? What is the for loop finding the index of it or the letter? Because that's what I was confused about. I thought it was finding how many vowels were in the string.
Okay, so you're saying you don't understand what the problem was, or you're not sure what the for loop did?
No, I'm not sure what the for loop is.
Great. Okay, so let's go through this. And a good thing to do if you were confused, okay, is to so if you didn't really know, a good thing to do is, I'm not sure what this does, so everybody watch this, because it's a good way to get an intuition to say, just let me print out what CH is. Okay, so now you sort of get a feel for it. And I get it, you're not comfortable with the for statement. That's not a criticism. I get it. This is all new to you. But a good way to get more familiar with it is to say, okay, fine, let me just do this now. And so if I were to run this, and I type in hello. Okay, so what's the answer to your question? Does the for loop do anything with the vowels? So let's take a look at what this does, where I just printed out the character, and this is what it gave me, HELLO. It's really just extracting from the string each character. So this loop here, okay, the nice part is that CH will assume each character in the string as I go through the loop. So the answer is that no, it's not doing anything with the vowel, the for loop. What it's doing for you is plucking off each character. So now you have the character, okay, now you've got to do something else. So now the thing something else is, now I've got to figure out, great, I've got this character, how do I determine if it's in fact a vowel? Okay, there's a number of ways of doing it. Okay, so one way of doing it, I did it one way here, is you could say if it's in, remember the in operator will tell us if that character is in that string. Okay, so, and if you weren't sure, what I would do is, so if you're sort of experimenting, okay, so, and in fact, that code here now prints out each of the vowels. Okay? So your question to me was, does the for loop find the vowel? No, it only gets the character.
But so you have vowel locations on append, is that appending the index of the vowel, or is that
Very good. So so I'm getting excited here. So, because this is the way you should think about it. These are all good questions. So if you had an idea that you wanted to create a list and you really weren't sure, And you think, well, what do I have now? I have the character. So maybe you'd say, well, maybe what I want to do is, so I have this list val locations. So I have a list val locations, which I initialize to nothing. And now I'm going to append ch. What do you think? And then, okay, it's going to do that. So at the end of the program here, let's print out val locations. What do you think it's going to print out? It prints out E and O in a list, which is what you had predicted, right? Okay. But that's not what I want. I wanted the location of them, right? But I'm getting warmer. So as I go through this, I say, well, crap, I'm almost there. I've got the vowels, but I don't know what locations they are. So the jump here was I need to now have some other variable which tells me what index I'm looking at. So I said create a variable called index. And what I want to do here is every time I go through the loop, I'm going to set index is equal to index plus 1. So when ch is equal to, and I'm typing it hello, when ch is equal to the h, the first iteration, what's I in dx going to be equal to?
To H.
No, what's I in dx, what's this variable going to be equal to?
That's 0.
And when in hello, when ch is e, what's I in dx going to be equal to?
2.
So I have hello. So you said it was 0 when it was h. What's it going to be when it's e?
1.
Right? Because it's just stepping one at a time. So now that I've done that, and that's a jump here, okay, now I was appending ch here. Now what do I want to append, really? And now when I run it, it in fact prints 1 and 4. Okay? So for people who struggle with this, and it was a harder problem, this was a big jump. Okay, you had to think outside the box. But I'm really a big advocate here of doing this incrementally, that if I can't get the whole thing, you know what I did? So you see how I did here? I said, well, why don't I just print out the character? And I think as you do it incrementally, it sort of gives you an idea of what's going on, and then hopefully you get the intuition of what you have to add. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, so the next one was the palindrome. I got palindromes on the brain. So we had already done a palindrome problem before, so you should have been able to figure out, we had code before that tests to see if it's a palindrome. The problem is now we have a string that could have a bunch of characters that are non-alphabetic. And what I need to do is I need to get rid of them. So I could have, when I'm typing in, I could have HE1, 3 EH, and the problem says, well, what you need to do is whatever you get typed in, take out of it. All I'm interested in is only the characters. What I really want to do is I want to transform this into HEEH, just the letters, and then once I do that, then I want to test to see it's a palindrome. So this problem really broke down into two parts. Taking the string and removing the stuff that was not letters, and then once I did that, then take that string, that resulting string, and then test to see if it's a palindrome. So there's no real easy way, unless somebody else had a solution for this. Okay, so my way was I can't extract out of, so I'm going to read into string what that string is, which originally is going to be this, and there's no easy way of taking the character out, unless somebody tells me otherwise. I guess I could have used remove. Well, let me go through my solution, see if somebody came out with something else. So I said, why don't I just create a new string I'm going to pluck off individual characters. So I'm doing my for ch in string again. I want to pluck off individual characters. I want to test to see if that character is an alpha. And if it is, then I said, okay, I've got now an alphabetic character. What I want to do now is take that character and now build up a new string which is just consists of those alphabetic characters. So the transformation to take the bad characters out of the input string was to build up a new string which just consists of the letters, the alphabetic characters that exist within the input string. And I'm doing that by doing concatenation. So here I have an old string. I needed to initialize that to nothing by doing double quote, and then what I'm doing here is I'm adding on the character one character at a time. And at the end of this, new string will just be, okay, H-E-E-H, and then at that point I can test to see if it's a palindrome. I think we did this before by taking this new string and see if it's equal to the string reversed, and the way you can take a string and reverse it is by using the slicing where you take the, if you remember, you can take substrings out, but if you do colon, colon minus 1, it returns the whole string in reverse order. So it makes it very easy to test for a palindrome. And so if they're equal, that means it's a palindrome. If they're not equal, it's not. Anybody have any questions or a different, better way to do this? Okay, hopefully everybody got it. I'll take silence as, okay, this was not that hard a problem. And then the last one, everybody should have gotten. This was really just a straightforward use of the for statement. So what we're doing is we're calculating annually what an investment is. So we have a $1,000 investment, and it's going to increase in value by 6%. And we want to know each year what the value of the investment is going to be. So this suggested to me that I needed to use a for statement that is going to iterate 5 times for each of the 5 years. And I'm going to calculate what the value is going to be, adding to it the interest that got accrued. And so since I want to do the same statement 5 times, it suggests to me that I wanted to use a for loop. And so I'm going to say for year, which is going to be the variable that's incremented in the range 1 to 6, which is going to run for 5 times. I'm going to calculate, I'm going to take the old balance and add to it how much interest we got by taking the balance and multiplying it times the interest rate, and then putting it back in balance. And then I want to print out what those values are going to be, so I just have a print statement that prints out year and prints out that new balance rounded to 2 decimal places. And that's going to iterate around for 5 times. So hopefully everybody got this. Is sort of a straightforward use of just the for statement. Okay. So okay, why don't we do a class, why don't we take 5 minutes and just reinforce this for loop. Why don't we try to do the following, everybody try to do this. So you're going to create a program that's going to have as a statement this list. So it has 8 values in the list. And what I want you to do now is I want you to write a program that is going to go through this list, and it's going to separate out, and it's going to build two new lists. One list that only consists of those values in the first list that are numbers, and then those values that consist of alphabetic characters. You could assume if it's not a number, you can assume that if it's not a number, let's do it the following way. If it's not an alphabetic, then it's a number. That's the only 2 things in the list. So write code now that takes this list in, and assuming you either have strings that are numbers or just alphabetics, Now, your output should be one list that just have the numbers. So notice here that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, and 55. 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, and 55. Let me do it this way. Word 1, word 2, and word 3. And so the values in the list are these 3 words, and what I want you to do is then print out in a second list those 3 words. So everybody here, let's take 5 minutes till 10 o'clock and write code that takes this and outputs this. And there could be any number of values in the list. Your code should work for any number of values in the list. Okay? Okay. So here's the list. And so what I need to do is I need to go through the list and find things that are all letters or all numbers. So I need to go through each element of the list. That suggests me for using what? A for statement, right? Because the for allows me, and it could be any variable here. The for now, the variable ELEM will now assume each value of the element of the list, each element of the list, ELEM will assume. So now that I've got ELM is going to be now in the first case when I run through the first time, it's going to be the character string 1. Now what do I have to do?
I made above the for statement, I made two lists, one for numbers and then one for pretty much everything else but numbers, because it's a combination. And then I tested.
So Andrew is going to create two null lists because we need to build up the list, and if we're going to be doing that, we need to initialize the list to nothing. Okay?
And then I tested to see if CH or L was a digit.
So Andrew is using the isDigit method to test to see if everything in ELM is a digit. Okay, just like we need to test to see if it's a val, but in this case we're using the isDigit method. And if it is?
If it is none.append element.
So then we're going to, now that we know that it's a digit, we're going to put in the num list, all those that are numbers.
Else words.append element.
Otherwise, I'm going to append to the words list that element because I know that it's not a number. And now I can just print them out. So again, I want to reinforce that the for statement is a way of, it does a couple of things for us. It allows me to repeat a number of statements a number of times. Typically, when I'm doing that, then here I'm going to be using the range. I'm going to say range of something. I'm going to say range of 1 to 100. That'll do it 99 times. So if I want to repeat something 99 times, I'm going to use the for statement. And in addition, the variable ELEM will assume the values 1 to 99. If I want to go through a list, then I just say for ELM in list, and it's going to go through each element of the list for me. So it's a good way of, if you're given a list, to pick out each element of the list. And then once I've picked out each element of the list, now I've got to do some additional work to do something else with it. But at least I don't have to worry about trying to pick out the elements and going from one to the other. Not only does it pick out the elements, it'll stop when I run out of elements in the list. So it's really useful for going through elements of the list. And if I had a string, here I'm just putting in a hard-coded string. Now ELEM will go through each character in the string, assuming each character, and I don't have to worry about when I get to the end of the string because the for statement helps me do that. So that's what the for is. That's the power of the for statement. It's really for iterating and for extracting elements from a list or extracting elements from a string. Okay? And that's when you need to use it. Okay. So new idea. Brian, question? So suppose I wanted to have a program that printed out the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and okay, so you say, all right, fine. I could write for I in range 1 to 6. So that's going to, I is now going to assume the values of 1 to 5. And then I could say print I. Right, that's going to print out. So I said here I want to print out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I want to print out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. So I said, well, that's going to print out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 once. I need to do it a second time. And so I say, fine, let me just copy this code. And that, in fact, will print it out a second time. Nothing new there. But it turns out there's a more convenient and easier way. Okay, because what I really want to do here, everybody, is I want to execute this code printing out the values from 1 to 5 2 times. I want to repeat statements twice. What does that suggest I use? When I say repeat statements a number of times, what does that suggest I use? Say again? A which type of loop? Well, a for, it could be a for or a while, right? Because both of those repeated. So remember that the statements that get executed in a for loop could be anything. We've seen some examples of that.
Could you do a nested for loop?
So I could, okay, everybody watch, okay, do the following, because I want to execute this twice, right? When I hear I want to execute the same set of statements a fixed number of times, I should immediately jump to, can't talk. I should immediately say, boy, that seems like I should be using a for loop. But now I'm having a for loop and a for loop, and the answer is yes. I'm going to change the variable here. I'm just changing the variable I'm using here so it'll be a little more clearer. Okay, don't type, let's listen. Let's look. This is a harder idea. So now I'm now have 2 for statements nested together, as Brian said. So what does this do here? What does this for statement do? Well, this for statement creates a variable called outer, and it initially sets it equal to 1, and then it will set it equal to 2, and it will stop when it gets to 3, right? So now, when this thing runs, the first time this for statement is encountered, outer is set equal to 1, and it goes on its merry way, and it says, oh, now the next thing I need to do is another for statement. Okay, so what's this for statement going to do? It's going to create a variable called inner and initialize it to 1. And then it's going to print inner. Everybody follow? This is what we've known so far. Now, after that first time inner gets printed, what's the next thing that's going to happen? Well, the way a for statement works, and we've just finished executing this for statement, is that it goes up and now takes this variable, and in this case is going to increment it by 1. Inner is now 2. 2 is less than 6, and therefore the for statement says, I should do this again. And so I'm going to now print inner, and now it's going to print 2. And now after it does that, it's going to go back up here to this for inner, and now it's going to make inner 3 and print 3, and make inner 4 and print 4, and make inner 5 and print 5. And then ultimately inner is going to be equal to 6. 6 is not equal to 6, and therefore this for statement is now done. And now what does it do? Well, here's the tricky part, because it's not so obvious visually. So now these 2 statements were really which is what get executed for this for statement because they're indented. Now what happens is now we're going to now increment outer. Outer is now equal to 2. 2 is less than 3, and therefore it says, oh, go and do the for statements that are below this statement here. So what is it going to do? It's going to execute that for inner equal in range again, right? So now if I run this, it in fact prints 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Okay, this is a little tricky, everybody. But I think if we break it down, let's go through this again. I wanted to execute this code twice. Everybody could write this code. If I asked you to write code that printed out the numbers from 1 to 5, you should be able to do it. But now I'm saying doing it twice, and the thing that should immediately say to you is, oh, I can execute lines of code as many times as I want by using a for statement. And so now I said, okay, now that I've written this thing that goes from 1 to 5, I can have this code execute a second time by, in fact, embedding it or nesting it within another for loop that executes 2 times.
I don't understand. Why do you even need the outer then? Why not just do the inner twice?
So, Hakeem, so you're saying just do that twice?
Yep.
Okay. So you're saying I would repeat those statements twice. Okay, what if I said now, and that would work, but Hakeem, what if I said, okay, I've changed my mind. I don't want to print 1 through 5 twice. I want to print 1 through 5 100 times. So how would you do that? So with the solution of repeating this, I'd have to repeat this 100 times, correct? If I did this, how would I change this to, in fact, print out the numbers from 1 to 5 repeated 100 times?
Change the inner to 100.
Change which one?
The inner.
So this inner here, this prints the numbers from 1 to 5, right? So what I want here is, the behavior I want is 1, yeah.
Are you going out, and I think you put the range name of 1.
So you see here, this is printing these numbers here. So inner is printing these numbers here. But I want to repeat that printing 1 through 5 100 times. So Zenard said, what I really want to do is I want to change that to 101. Because what I'm saying here is I want to repeat these statements 100 times. Get it? So the beauty of this is I can run this code as many times as I want by simply changing the parameters here. So we really haven't learned a new statement. All we've learned is that we can get this behavior of repeating statements any number of times, and in some cases, what we want to repeat is going to be a for statement. And it looks hairy because you've got 2 for statements in a row, and it's a little difficult to understand when this gets incremented and then that gets incremented. So the rule is that this thing is going to run through to completion, and once it does, then we go back and we increment the outer loop. It doesn't have to be the word outer, it could be any variable there. And assuming that this is going to be below this value here, it's going to re-execute from scratch this inner loop. Okay, so okay, everybody. So here's what I want you guys to try and do. So I've given you the start of this, where this prints the numbers from 1 to 5 and it prints it twice. What I want you to do now is to generate this output, where you're going to print out the numbers. I prefixed the number with the word inner. So you're going to print the numbers from 1 to 5. But now, and you're going to prefix it with the word inner, that you're just going to change your print statement. That's not a big deal. But now what you're going to do is you're going to change your code such that after you've printed out the fifth, the number 5, you're going to print the word next. So separating each string of 1 to 5 is going to be the word next, and you're going to do this twice. We have previously, remember the code we just wrote prints out the numbers from 1 to 5. That code prints out twice the numbers from 1 to 5. Now all I want to do is I want to enhance that so that now, let me put it on here, so it's going to print inner, it's going to print inner, the word inner, and then 1, inner, 2, I don't care about the spacing. And then after it prints enter 5, it's going to print the word next, and then it's going to go on and repeat this again, and it's going to print enter 1, enter 2, enter 3, enter 4, enter 5, enter, and then afterwards it's going to print next, and then the program is going to stop. So you're going to amend this code. This is the basic code because this prints out 1 through 5. But now you're going to have to figure out how to get the word next in there. Okay, so I amended the code to put the word enter here. So now, how do I get the word next to print after it's finished printing the numbers 1 to 5? Oh, Jen?
Print the string next, like in the same indent as the second loop.
See if that works. Great. Enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 next. Enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 next. So very good, Jen. So what did Jen do? Jen inserted printing the word next. Now, in which loop does this really get executed? Right, there are 2 loops here, the for outer and the for inner. Where is this getting executed? Which of those 2? The for outer, right? Because, first of all, it's indented. It's easy to see that this is really part of this for outer loop, right? So the way this is going to work is outer assumes the number 1, inner assumes the number 1. It says print inner. Inner gets incremented. Inner is now 2. And so this is going to loop around 5 times. Ultimately, inner is going to be 6. This for loop finishes. And now we print the next statement that's part of this for outer loop, which is to print the word next. It prints the word next. And now it goes back and increments outer. Outer is now 2. 2 is less than 3. And now it's going to go back and execute the inner loop 5 times again. And then it's going to fall out of the inner loop, print next, increment outer. Outer is now 3, and we're all done. Okay, everybody's got to get it. Would this have been, okay, what would have this done? After it would have print inner 1 and then next inner 2. Right, very good. So the indenting is crucial. Okay, let's do one more. Yeah, why don't we do this one? Now what I want to do, okay, we'll just do it twice. Is I want to now add to that Okay, so now I want you to print the word outer, and then print next to outer the value of outer at that point in time. So outer, okay, so we're in the outer loop. I want you to print outer, and then, okay, let's just do it to 4 times now. So we're going to go 1 through 4, and then we're going to print the word next. Then we're going to go outer 2, and then print 1 through 4, and the word next, and we're going to be done. So here's the basic code. How am I going to change this code now such that now what I want to do is now I want to include the word outer and the value of outer before printing the inner code going from 1 to 4. So I couldn't fit it on the slide. That's why I went for 4. So this should be 5 here. So change that code now to actually print out the word outer as seen in the slide. So I just have to add one more statement. Where am I going to put it? Oh, Madison?
In between the 2 for statements, when you want to indent it, you put print and then close outer, comma outer. Well, end quote.
Terrific. And that gives me that behavior. So it prints outer. So note here, Madison was right. Madison, okay, the first thing now I want to do in the outer loop is not go into the inner loop, but in fact print out outer and the value of outer, then do the inner loop stuff. Then after I'm done with the inner loop stuff, print next, go back and do the whole thing over again. So really what I'm doing here is I'm simply running this code 2 times because outer is going from 1 to 3, so it's going to execute twice. So this notion of the for statement can execute a whole bunch of statements, whatever they are, some number of times. And what I'm doing is I'm just executing these statements here twice. Okay, so now that you actually can't see that, okay, so let me... Okay, so now I want to change this code that instead of printing the word next, what I want to do is I want to add up the values from the inner loop. And I'm going to print out sum of inner that is equal to 10. So I still want to print outer, but now instead of printing the word next, what I want to do is I want to print the sum of all the values in the inner loop. And you just can't print 10 out. You actually have to add them up because I should be able to change that inner loop to being 1 to 5 to being 1 to anything. Okay, so what do I got to do to sum those numbers up and print them out?
Instead of the next part, I put sum of inner in quotes, and then I did sum of the range of 1 to 5.
What'd you do?
So, after that, in comma, and then I wrote sum, then parentheses, range, parentheses, 1, comma 5, and then the 2 more times.
That worked? I hate you. Okay. Okay. What if we didn't want to use the sum in the range? Okay, you screwed up my lecture. You happy now? So, what if we wanted to add up in the loop, add up the numbers? So what I want to do here is now within the inner loop, add up these numbers. Right, so I have a running total here. Right, so we've seen this before where I'm simply adding in inner and adding it to the sum of inner. I'm going to iterate through this. Right, and then I'm going to print out sum of inner. So that's sort of what Madison had. She simply told them all in one shot. Here I'm going through the iteration one at a time. Everybody get it? Okay, so what's wrong with this code? Why won't this work? If you type this in, this is going to give you an error. So where would I do that, Madison? You can redeem yourself.
I was confused about this earlier. You see where it says sum inner equals sum inner plus inner?
Yeah.
How can it add sum inner to something when it's not? That's what I'm...
Where some inner it doesn't exist yet, right? So we've got to do something about that.
Oh, well, you just do my sum of the range of 1 to 5 above that?
No, I need to initialize some inner.
Right, to the sum of range of 1 to 5.
No, I want to set it equal to 0, right? Because I'm going to be adding up one at a time.
Okay.
So where would I put it?
Right before that?
Where?
In between range and sum inner?
But then if I did that, so if we did this, okay, then inner is going to be equal to 1, right? I'm going to print out inner. Sum inner is equal to 0. Then take 0 plus 1, so sum inner is equal to 1, right? I come back, now inner is equal to 2. I print out inner 2. I reset sum equal to 0. And now I'm taking sum inner, which is now 0, and adding 2 to it.
So you have to put it 4.
So where would I put it now?
All the way to the top,
Where at the
or the fourth statement.
here?
Yeah. Press that.
Well, let's see what happens, everybody. So let's run it. So it added up the 1 to 4, and it got me 10, but then it seemed like it added up 1 to 4 again, but it had the old value of 10. I wanted this to be 10 here. So it worked the first time, but it didn't work the second time. And what was the cause of that?
Oh, you need to put you would have to put the sum inner out right after the 4 outer, or could you also put it all the way at the bottom too? But yeah, as long as it's the first indent after.
You have to, okay, that's good, Andrew. I can't do it at the bottom because it has to have a value before it comes in here. So it really does have to be here. Does everybody see that? I'm initializing sum inner to 0. Okay, you see this, nerd? Because now I come through, I'm reinitializing it. It's part of this loop here that's going through and printing out the inner, and I just want to reinitialize sum inner so that when I come into this loop, sum inner is equal to 0. Okay. So let's take a look at this problem, everybody. Okay, so this is really the the culmination of this. So suppose what I want to do is I want to write a program that is going to prompt somebody to enter in 3 grades for the students and print out their average. We did this before. I think we did this in one of the original programs. You ask them for a grade, they type in a grade, a second grade, and a third grade, and then you type in the 3 values that they entered and you compute the average. We did that before. This part here. The difference is, now I want to do this for a certain number of students. So what I want the behavior to be is, you're going to ask the person, how many students do you have? And they're going to say, I'm going to have 2 students. And then you're going to say, well, how many exams do you have? And they're going to type in 3. They can type in whatever they want. And then what you're going to do is, you're going to prompt them to say, enter in for student number 1, exam 1 score, they'll type that in. Student number 1, exam score 2, they'll type that in. Student number 1, exam score 3, and they'll type that in. And then, since there are only going to be 3 exams, they told you that, you're going to then compute the average and then print it out. And then after you do that, you're going to prompt them again for the scores for student 2, their first exam, student 2, their second exam, student 2, their third exam. Print out the average, and then you stop because they said they're only doing this for 2 students. Okay, does everybody get it? So we're going to do this together, okay? Because this is really this is sort of the crux here. So if I were to say to you, okay, this seems hard. And the way to attack this problem is to try to simplify it. So what would be one simplification? So the simplification would be, everybody, what if I said to you, write a program that prompts the person for entering in the number of exams that they give. In this case, they would type in 3. And then print out the prompt, enter in score for exam 1, enter in score for exam 2, enter in exam for 3, read in those values, and print out the average. Could you do that? Forget about n students, 2 students, just 1 student. So the behavior, what I'm asking you for is, forget about how many students. Let's simplify this and say, just type in okay, so we're going to ask them to enter in the number of exams. And then what we want to do is we're going to say, okay, however many exams they type in, we're going to prompt them to enter in the grade for that exam. How would I go and do that? What would that suggest to you? That I don't know the number of exams, but num exams has that number, and I want to prompt them for that number of exams. What would I use to be able to do that? Seemed like the thing to say, right, Madison? So I'm going to do a for loop. Let's suppose I don't care. I just want to iterate a number of times. So I'm going to do I in range 0. I'll do num to. And I have to do +1 because I want that number of exams. If I just did it to exams, it would stop short. So now I have a for loop that is going to iterate through for number of exams. I could have done that, or I could have done 0 or to this amount. So if you need to iterate a certain number of times, you can use from 0 to that amount, or let's do it this way. This is probably better. Okay. So I'm going to now prompt them for the score for exam I, where I is this variable here, and I'm concatenating it. You need to concatenate it when you put it in an input statement. So now I've read in the exam score, and I've put that into exam score. Okay. And let's suppose I want to complete this. I'm going to be iterating through this however many times, let's say 3 times. What do I want to do now to help compute the average? What do I need to do now? How do I compute the average?
Just add at the moment. And divide.
Right. But I need to now have a variable that I can put into to add them up, right? So I'm going to create a variable total, set it equal to 0, get the exam score, take the exam score, add it to total, put it back into total, and then this thing's going to iterate for however many exams the person is giving, right?
Why do you need to create total?
Here,
Yep.
if I didn't create this, that when I executed this statement, Python's going to say, okay, he wants to take total and he wants to add it to exam score. Python knows what exam score is because a line above it, the person typed it in. But if you didn't define it before, Python's going to say, he didn't tell me what total is. So in order to use any variable on the right-hand side of the equal sign, it had previously had to been defined. And so therefore, I needed to say over here that it was equal to 0. It does not by default say it's 0. You have to explicitly say it. So if you're using a variable, if you're using the variable on the right-hand side of the equal sign, you have to have defined it and set it equal to a value. Okay, so let's complete this for printing out the average. So now I have the total, now what? How do I compute the average now? I want to print out the average. I got all the scores, I put it in total, now calculate the average. How do you get the average?
Divided by the number of exams.
Exactly. And now that's not in the loop, right, Luke? Because I don't want that. I'm just going to say, three exams. Crap. Okay, fine. I have to create a string out of this. Is that right?
Why do you have to put I there?
Well, you'll see in a minute. You know what? I'm going to take it out. It's just more confusing at this point. So, three exams. So I'm going to enter in the score 90, 80, 70, and it prints out the average. Everybody good with that? We've done this before. So this code, this iterates through, in this case, 3 times. I've added up the total, and I'm simply dividing by the number of exams. So I've used the for loop to be able to prompt a certain number of times to get the right number of exam scores, and then I print out the average. Going back to the original problem, okay, So I've just solved the problem for calculating the exam, the average score for one student, where I'm giving 3 exams. Okay, everybody's got to get this. But now I want to, okay, does everybody see I've solved the problem of doing it for one student. Now I want to do it for any number of students. I want to let the person say I have 5 students and then have this thing iterate through, if let's say it's 3 exams, 5 times. What does that suggest now? I take this code, what do I do to this code now to now run it for however many students the person says?
Well, you would nest it. You would nest that. What we already have. But pretty much the same thing on the other.
Exactly. And now what am I going to do, Mario?
Figure 4.
It could be anything here. Let's just say J.
In range 0 non-students.
Everybody see, all I did here, this is the code we had before. And in order to get this thing to run a certain number of times, all I needed to do was to add to it another for loop, which was going to iterate through for this number of times. And that's the beauty of this nested for. So if I can solve it for one, here I solved it for one student. Solving it for any number of students was trivial by simply tacking on another for loop, which was going to go through and do it for however many times I needed for that number of students. So here, okay,
So should the number of exams in total outside the for loop?
yes, that would be better. I agree. So Brendan's right. I probably I don't want to reprompt him to get annoyed by asking him for that. The number of exams are going to be the same, and so I should probably take it outside the loop. Not probably, I should. That's a good suggestion. So I get the number of students, I get the number of exams, and now for now this for loop controls the number of students, and this for loop controls the number of exams. And note here I have to reset the total to 0 each time because this total is going to reflect the total for that individual student, so I have to reset it to 0 here. It would be wrong, right, if I did this. Okay, so I've sort of answered Hakeem's complaint. Why do I have to set total to something? Well, I said I needed to have a value. Okay, so fine, I said it's value, but this would be wrong. Why would this give me the wrong answer? In what case would it give me the wrong answer if I were to set total equal to 0 at the top of the loop? Before, I had it that's where I had it. If I, in fact, didn't have it there and had it up there, where would I get a problem?
For the second student, the total would be the total for the last student.
Does everybody see that? If I had total here, so total is equal to 0, I come through, okay, I'm doing stuff for the first student, I'm iterating around, and total now has the total exam scores for the first student. Great. Take that total, divide it by the number of exams, and get that student's average. Now I come back here and I iterate again, and now, fine, I'm doing this for the second student, and now I'm prompting, so now I get the exam score for the second student, their first exam. The problem is that total hasn't been reset, so that total reflects the total for the first student. So I'm adding into that total, that first, for the second student, the exam score that they got on the first exam plus what the total was for the first student. So I needed to, instead of initializing total there, I needed to initialize total there. So now every time I'm going to this loop, getting exam scores and averaging them, I know that I've reset total equal to 0. The takeaway from this is the following. Again, I solved the one case problem here, and it was trivial if I wanted to do this a number of times by simply adding on to it another loop that is going to execute these statements this number of times. And that's really, I mean, the crap I did before, we're doing in and outer, I'm trying to get you to understand it. But here, in reality, is where these nested loops, this is one place where they're used. There are other sort of programming cases where they're used. But the biggest one is I have a section of code I want to repeat. It turns out in that code I have a for loop. Who cares? The outer for loop will allow me to execute that any number of times. And yes, I could have used while loops instead of the for loops, but the for loop really makes it much more convenient. Okay. So the homework, it looks long, but it's just I put it on separate pages. Of course, the homework is due Monday. If you have any problems with it, send the problem and send the code, and I'll try to help you out. Okay, see you on Monday.